WCPT 820.
Okay, everybody. Alex Aronson is back with us. He is the founder and executive director of Court Accountability. Boy, what a good idea that would be. Alex is one of the heroes in this fight, and he knows it's a battle on lots of fronts. Alex, welcome back.
Edwin, thanks for the kind words. It's great to be back with you.
Hey, instead of starting in on a corrupt and captured Supreme Court, at least to start, can we talk about OMB? You spent a lot of time in the government, so have I. You know what OMB is, but I think it's worth explaining to everybody what it is, how powerful it is, and what damage a guy like Russ Vought could do if he leads it.
Yeah, so OMB doesn't get a lot of attention in sort of the national news coverage of the big appointments, but it's, as you note, an incredibly powerful and important office connected to the White House. I think a good way to think about it would be as sort of a hub for the implementation of the executive branch's agenda, particularly through the executive agencies. And Russell Vought, it sounds like your audience might be familiar with him, is
not enough.
He's the nominee to OMB, to lead OMB. He was Trump's director of that office, the Office of Management and Budget, the first time around. He's got deep experience in Washington, sort of the consummate insider, worked on the Hill, of course, ran that office in the first Trump administration. He knows the ins and outs of the government, and he has spent the last 8 years building this plan to implement the full-throated version of Project 2025 that he architected at a group called the Center for Renewing America, which is an offshoot of the conservative the conservative. The name's escaping me for a second. It's called CPI, but he has been, in detail, putting these plans together for the implementation of this Project 2025 agenda. And some of the plans he has in place are truly far-reaching and scary if we want to break down what they're doing.
No, I think we do. But to do them, let's start, before we get to the specific plans, to do them, they have to pretend that something called the Impoundment Control Act doesn't exist. And people listening have heard this because I predicted for months it would be the first thing to go. I was wrong. A lot of other things have already fallen, but they're going to go after this one. So tell everybody what that means, and once they get rid of it or ignore it, what they're able to do.
That's right. The Impoundment Control Act of 1974. Now we're getting kind of wonky here, and the group I couldn't remember was the Conservative Partnership Institute, Jim DeMint's outfit. So the Impoundment Control Act was passed after President Nixon asserted a inherent unilateral power of impoundment. And impoundment is the concept under which a president asserts to be able to take the core congressional power, the power of the purse, and unilaterally decide not to spend money that Congress has authorized and appropriated. And when he did that, when Nixon did that, the courts unanimously, Supreme Court unanimously struck him down. And even his own Office of Legal Counsel, which at that time was run by William Rehnquist, who would go on to be an ultra-conservative right-wing Supreme Court Chief Justice, said, this is nuts. We can't do this. So the Supreme Court struck him down, and then Congress, a broad bipartisan Congress, passed the Impoundment Control Act to actually create procedures by which the president could seek to not spend money that Congress wanted to spend. And there's a whole procedure that the executive is supposed to go through if they make this determination that as these folks are now claiming they want not to spend money for the interest of avoiding waste and efficiency, which of course is a ruse. But what's truly terrifying about what they're doing here is it's not just that they're arguing that the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 is unconstitutional. Underlying that is, again, this claim of inherent executive authority. And at the CRA, at the Center for Renewing America, Russell Vought and Mark Paoletta, who your audience may know from the famous picture of Clarence Thomas and Leonard Leo, the Supreme Court architect, and Harlan Crow, the real estate mogul who had given Thomas upwards of $4 million over the decades as he sought to foster that relationship and create these anti-regulatory outcomes at the court. He's the one that wrote the paper in the middle of 2023 to declare this inherent impoundment authority. And it's very clear from the way Vought handled his two confirmation hearings in the House and the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee and at Budget, that they plan to just go straight through the strictures of the Impoundment Control Act and take this case right to the court.
And I think they want to take an additional step, not just refuse to spend money the way Congress has authorized it to be spent, but to take the purse and spend it entirely as they want to spend it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is part and parcel of this retributive agenda that we've seen unleashed in this first week of the administration. They're going to use this power as a one-way ratchet to reward their friends and to punish their enemies. And what's going to be so sad and tragic about its implementation is that they're not going to be able to, narrowly tailor these decisions. And people all across the country, in blue states, red states, and purple states alike, are going to feel the impact. And Republican elected officials need to answer for this, right? They, as we've seen so far, they are willing to do whatever it takes to stay in Trump's good graces, to confirm somebody as deeply unqualified, to as important a post as the Secretary of Defense like Pete Hegseth. But this is going to come right back to their home districts, to their home states, and people are going to suffer as a result of this agenda.
Well, we've handed them, if they get away with this, they will have a lever that is bigger and more powerful than anyone has ever had, which is the entire Treasury of the United States, to do with what they wish. And that is appalling.
It really is. And to tie it back to the court and this longer-term project that it's such a big focus of our work at Court Accountability, this 50-year campaign to really erode democracy and entrench oligarchy, we're seeing, what has been the central thrust of that effort is to take away congressional power under various of its core authorities, the commerce power, the spending power, and the attempt to establish this so-called unitary executive with broad sweeping executive power. And the court, which has all along the way sought to aggrandize its own power, has enabled this as part of this long-term right-wing Federalist Society agenda. And we saw the canary in the coal mine, really more than that, with the Trump versus United States immunity case, which not only protects presidents like Trump from criminal accountability, but handed presidents what they deemed preclusive and conclusive authority. And we're going to need to see the scope of what they're willing to allow as President Trump pushes those powers to their limit. And more than that, we're going to see the scope of their ability to restrain him if they even try.
Yeah, I worry. You called it a canary in a coal mine, and that is optimistic. I worry that it is the miners are dead, and it's a tombstone on a grave.
Yeah.
They've given way too much power to a president. And it's so interesting, Alex. They've undermined Congress left and right. So you would think that their decision to weaken the executive branch by saying, oh, no, you can't regulate. Congress has to do all the regulating. This undoing of the Chevron doctrine and a few other decisions over the last year. But it's cynical. It doesn't really give that power to Congress because Congress isn't equipped to have that power. It's like telling me I could fly. Sure, you have the power to fly, except that God didn't give me wings.
And beyond that, they know that the same interests that put them in power, that are behind Trump and Project 2025, have Congress captured. This goes back to Citizens United and the flood of dark money and unlimited corporate and billionaire money into our politics. It's not just the Republicans that the billionaires can fund to make sure that they stay in power and can continue to pursue this obstructive non-agenda over the decades, but the Democrats themselves are trapped, right? They can never really serve the working people because at the end of the day, the big corporate interests, the monopolies that have been allowed to flourish, can wipe them out of office with an unlimited dark money campaign.
Yeah. Russ Vought is about to, he will get confirmed. I don't doubt it. I don't know how he swears an oath, which he would have to do when he says we're in post-constitutional times. Something he's very proud of.
Yeah, those are his words. I mean, he describes his vision as a radical constitutional vision. He's a self-described Christian nationalist. He's an abortion abolitionist. His views of the way the world should be are truly beyond the pale. I thought the Democrats in the two hearings he had did a serviceable job in pointing out just how extreme and far-reaching his agenda posed to be in terms of the real world impact. But I don't think we've fully processed the extent to which he and this cabal of interests that have put him in power are willing to go to completely destroy and rebuild our country in their image. And to your point about the oath he's going to have to swear, that sort of came to light a little bit in these hearings, as they asked him, will you follow the law? And he says, yes, of course I'll follow the law. But what he means is he'll follow the law as he believes it exists. And he has these views of the Constitution that have been rejected over and over through the centuries.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of not up to him. At least if we have a rule of law, it's not up to any individual to say the law is what I think it is.
Yeah, that's right. And, I think that I'm glad you brought up that rule of law phrase, because we're hearing it a lot these days. And I think it's just an important concept to reckon with in this time. And what does rule of law mean? We've seen in other countries that have faced authoritarian threats, democratic decline, that judges are installed, they change the meaning of the law, and then the rule of law is that now. So it's sort of like an authoritarianism by legal means. And so I think we're far too reflexive to fall back on this rule of law construct as a way to organize our idea of what society means in a moment like this. And I think this is one of the big short-sightedness of the National Democrats as they try to engage with this challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Saudi Arabia and worked there for a long time. The rule of law as we in the West understand it is when people get together and decide the rules they're going to live by. Mm-hmm. But the rule by law, the law of rule, is as old as time, and it is not anything that liberates anybody.
Yeah. There's actually a Chicagoan, an amazing professor at the University of Chicago, who recently wrote a wonderful book. It's a short primer. It's very accessible. He's brilliant. And it's about this concept of rule of law in the, after the first 25 years of the 21st century. I don't want to put you on the spot because names are tough,
but whose book is it?
His name is Aziz Hook. He's a wonderful professor, brilliant guy.
I'm writing that down. I'll be reading
H-U-Q.
H-U-Q. Got it. So Doge is now a thing. They, of course, could not make a department by executive order. I don't doubt a compliant Congress would have done it for them, but they were in a hurry, so they just renamed an existing department. But they found a way out, I don't understand, to get Elon Musk to have authority in the United States government, but not covered by any of the ethics rules that govern or disclosure rules that govern anybody else who works for the people. How is that possible?
Well, it's not. It's illegal, and it's interesting the way they did this. There was a lot of anticipation, planning. Yeah. Yeah. We saw immediately upon the first day of the administration a number of lawsuits to challenge this. Everybody assumed it would be set up as a federal advisory committee, and there are rules and laws in place that restrict the way those committees are set up. And so that's what those lawsuits were based on the Federal Advisory Committee Act, and anticipated violations of it. But it was actually kind of clever, I think, the way they did it. They renamed the United States Digital Service, an existing sort of sub-quasi-agency of the White House. And I think they very clearly did that to circumvent those FACA challenges. At the same time, there are other laws that require the performance of what are known as inherent government functions to be performed by federal employees who should be subject to ethics laws. Yep. And, it seems very clearly that what Elon Musk is doing, effectively running a shadow presidency, would meet that definition. And so we'll see what type of legal challenges emerge to stop that. And then, of course, it comes back to the courts, which, I think
will be very busy. The good news is that there are great federal judges in the system, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And the Supreme Court is not going to take every case. They can't. They have some limits. So
that's right.
I don't think the judiciary is completely corrupt.
Oh, no, of course it's not. And President Biden and your home state Senator Dick Durbin deserve a lot of credit for some really incredible judicial confirmations over the last 4 years. And it's certainly a very important first line bulwark to bring these lawsuits, to get these national injunctions, which are, there are real problems with the national injunction status quo that we have now. We've seen the right exploit this flaw in the system through the Northern District of Texas and the extremist judge down there, Matthew Kacsmaryk, and others. But there will be very important legal challenges that at least slow down some of this stuff.
But we just did it with a 14th Amendment.
Yep, absolutely. And so, but those cases will make their way to the court when you've got a nationwide injunction placed on a major national policy like that. I think the court's going to have a hard time avoiding that stuff, and it's going to have a ton of opportunities to both advance the Trump Project 2025 agenda, those parts of it with which it agrees. And this is admittedly sort of taking my cynical view of the way these right-wing justices operate, but then also opportunities to strike down theories and plans that go farther than they want and give themselves more opportunity to create the appearance of themselves as
legitimacy. Yeah, that's why I don't think they're going to strike down birthright citizenship. It's too clear in the law.
I think so too, and I think this impoundment question is another one where I even a cynic like myself would have a hard time seeing them going full bore for this. But you never know. You never know with these folks.
I got to ask you a very difficult question, because I know you worked closely with and know very well Senator Whitehouse. He's been on this show. I'm a very big fan of his, but I think yesterday he may have said, RFK Jr. is a longtime friend, and I might vote for him.
I saw
that.
Can
you shed any light on that?
I don't think I can shed any light on it, other than to say that I would be disappointed if my former boss did vote for RFK. It's been the politics of that confirmation have been very strange. Leonard Leo, the court architect, has been active in opposing RFK's nomination. I think underlying his opposition is the issue of abortion, which is Leonard Leo's probably first held principle and most clear priority. RFK and the incoming HHS folks refused to give one of Leo's close allies, Roger Severino, a top deputy position there. I don't know what Senator Whitehouse is thinking. I don't want to kind of get ahead of him on the actual vote. Yep. It would be ultimately quite shocking to me if he did do that. But I will say one thing about my old boss is that he while an incredible champion for democracy and justice and the people and against oligarchy and protecting the climate, he has these relationships that go back for a long time, and he takes them seriously. And on questions like this, he'll certainly listen to the voices of his constituents, to important pillars of the advocacy community. But he makes his own mind up at the end of the day. It's one of the things that I admire about him, but also could certainly have. It was challenging once or twice as a staffer.
Well, as he should. I mean, he has to live with a vote, as he should. So
it would be a reckless confirmation, particularly in the post-pandemic era, and this guy's dangerous views on vaccines and other public health issues.
Hey, we're in, the end game of Viktor Orban's playbook here in the United States. And I am a Democrat. I've been, though, somewhat, I'm proud of the work that we have done, but I've been a little bit critical of our aging leadership in Washington and think that we could have some stronger fighters. And I want to sort of get your sense about that, about, how we unleash I just have this. I'm sorry, I'm rambling.
Yeah.
This
I'm with you.
Scene from The Godfather has been in my head, mostly with regard to Merrick Garland, but with regard to a lot of them, where Al Pacino leans over and says, "Tom, you're not a wartime consigliere.
Yeah.
I love you. You're like a brother to me, but you're not a wartime consigliere." And I just, there's times when you need people who are tough.
Yeah, I couldn't probably be more disappointed in the posture of the Democratic leadership and most of its rank and file, frankly, since the election of Donald Trump. I think there's a lot of, misreading of what brought us here and the exactly wrong impulse in terms of how to respond to it, looking for accommodation, compromise, normalizing what is not just extreme in terms of what our country has been through and what is acceptable, but completely in a different paradigm, a fundamentally anti-democratic paradigm.
Yeah. It's not a normal time.
And in this environment, we've got just a handful of leaders, people like Jamie Raskin and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who are willing to even use words like theocracy or Nazi, which is, I think quite clearly how you should describe what Elon Musk was signifying on the day of Trump's inauguration. And, it's more of the same in terms of decades of resorting to vague and abstract concepts like bipartisanship and institutionalism and rule of law that don't do anything for people anymore. They don't, you can't eat institutions. You can't eat the rule of law. And people are struggling out there. They distrust these institutions. They distrust both parties. They see them both as equally corrupt. I don't believe they are equally corrupt, but I think the Democrats, unless they start to draw these starker contrasts and fight back against what is so deeply un-American and unacceptable to our core and fundamental values, they're not going to be able to convince people, and they're not going to be able to bring back the base that they've lost.
Right. This is old habit of pretending it's a normal time and approaching the other party by normal means. Yeah. When the other party's a tiger and looks at you like a meal. Is a very bad idea. We've just had 5 days that could change the world. Yeah. 5 lawless, reckless, greedy days where the Republicans have made clear that there are no boundaries they won't run over, that there are no norms that they respect, and there's nothing they just don't want to take and hand to their billionaire friends. And if we can't make that, if that doesn't wake them up, then, we need a new crop of people who are awake and aware and ready to take that fight.
I could not agree more. Yeah, and it's not only does it give cover to the authoritarian attack on our democracy and on our values and on our freedoms, but it is politically reckless and foolish. And I think the product of this kind of institutionalized polling and corporate industrial complex that has got too much of the ear of Democratic leadership.
Okay, so we've talked about OMB, we've talked about Russ Vought and the damage that he can do to the whole government. We've talked about using the enormous power of the purse of the United States, not as the legislature intends it, but just for whatever ends the guy in charge has, all of which will be challenged in court. A lot of that will end up in front of the Supreme Court, which has been on a 15-year or so fight to limit democracy. What should Americans do?
We have to stay engaged. We have to stay informed. We have to build power and connection in our communities and leverage that to assert our will and have our voice be heard. This last part of the conversation about the inability of Democrats to find themselves, to find a soul, to find a fight in this moment of obvious urgency is, I think, a ripe opportunity for people to get engaged. Democrats need to know this is not acceptable. They need to hear from people. It's a great time to, I said stay engaged and informed. So many people are running away from the news, and it's so understandable. Why would you want to engage with this? It's heart-rending. It's sickening. It adds stress to our daily lives, and that's understandable. And I think taking care of ourselves first and foremost in our families and communities needs to be a priority. But Once we've done that, we must understand truth and share truth, build community around these ideas, and the promise of democratic action and pushback. If you look at other countries that have experienced authoritarian takeovers like this, it's really hard to get out of it, right? Particularly after you've got the Supreme Court captured and the laws being changed. But it's not impossible. We need to stand up against authoritarian activity. We need to expose it. We need to speak to it for what it is, and in a blocking sense. And then we need to build toward the future that we know is possible, toward the future that our children deserve, and not give up on ourselves, because that's what democracy is, right? It's not the idea that we represent these people and they take power and represent us. We must stay engaged between the elections and hold on to that.
And by the way, everybody, we have an example. I mean, Wisconsin, the most gerrymandered state in the nation, was a state that the people's voice could not be heard unless they had an enormous supermajority. And you know what? They got them. They came together, they organized together, and they managed to get fair maps, and they managed to flip their Supreme Court. It's harder to do on a national scale, but it is a similar problem where the deck is stacked against ordinary people, but they came together and they did it. We can do it.
Absolutely.
Alex, it's great to catch up. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Edwin.